Hey everybody, thanks for checking out The Animals in Quarantine, a Big Light podcast. A 3-part series where the members of the band get together to discuss our new record, Ships. My name's Jeremy Korpas, I play lead guitar for the band Big Light, and I'll be your host for the next 3 episodes. And now for our first episode of the podcast, I sit down with the one and only Fred Torphy, lead singer-songwriter of Big Light. Alright buddy, how you doing?
Hanging in there. Doing okay.
It's weird to think... I'm all right. I'm okay. Day 28 in quarantine, and
I can't believe it's day 28 already.
I know, it's a month. But what is cool about it is it leaves us in this kind of interesting position where we were already trying to put a record out in the year 2020, and it was already going to be an unconventional release, since we're not really a band that makes music to tour anymore, but we're still making music for the joy of it and for ourselves. And I think it's just interesting now that we find ourselves here in a position where maybe the quarantine might benefit us putting a record out in an unconventional style for a band who's not going to tour with no chance of touring. Yeah, and I think it's just like an interesting little position we've got ourselves in here.
Yeah, someone commented to me last night, they're like, this is the perfect time for you guys to be putting out a record because you basically have a captive audience. And like, obviously the circumstances suck, but there's definitely some truth to that. I think like people might actually give it a deeper listen than they might normally if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I think people will actually like put on headphones or, like give it a proper listen, which I think like this record kind of needs in a way, like in a strange way, like things are sort of coming around for this release in a way that I think it like suits the music and yeah, I'm excited to put this out and yeah.
Cool. Well, let's why don't you tell everybody how this got started? How Ships first came to be?
Sure. God, it's a little bit of a long story, so I'll try to just tell it in the phases that it sort of unfolded. Because it goes back a couple of years for sure. Like, I don't know if you remember, you were just talking about your back. And I guess this would have been the summer of 2015. I don't know if you remember this, but you came to us with the idea of getting Big Light back together to do a show with Nathan Moore at Doc's Lab. It was going to be like a post High Sierra show. First time we would have played together since 2011, I think, or 2012. Right. So I had been doing a residency at Doc's Lab, which is now, surprise, surprise, closed. A small little sort of like sit-down jazz club in North Beach. Used to be the Purple Onion. Everybody knows. Anyway, I was sort of in the midst of a year-long residency there with D-Bar and Cochran playing under Fred Torphy and the Spirits. And it was sort of like, very like ad hoc. And we'd have a different band supporting us each week. And it was really fun and sort of like ended up writing some new material. And we never did that show with you because you got injured. We still did the show because we had promoted it and felt like, Nathan was in town. Why not? And then after that, the Tuesday Spirits thing went back to normal. We finished the year, and the club came back to us at the end of the year and said, "Hey, do you want to do that again?" And my first reaction was like, that sounds fun, but it was a ton of work to do that whole thing. Like I was working like I am still full time. And that in itself was like another job, having to find a band each week and promote it. And, it's just hard to get people out on a Tuesday night in San Francisco. So I politely declined the offer, but went to the guys I had been playing with and said, how about instead of doing shows, we record some of these songs. So that was sort of the initial impetus behind like starting to book studio time. So we had reconnected with Jeremy Black, who, for those listening who don't know, produced the first Big Light EP, and then co-produced the second record, Animals in Bloom, with us at his studio, Coyote Hearing. And maybe we could talk about that whole process some other time, because there are definitely some great stories from making that record. But anyway, so yeah, Jeremy had somehow got into the good graces of the Tape Op guys, who had built a new studio in Stinson Beach called Panoramic House. I think they got commissioned to initially just rent a place for My Morning Jacket to record The Waterfall. And they ended up finding this mansion, like at the foot of Mount Tam, overlooking the Bolinas Lagoon, like the most amazing building like that you could ever put a studio in. It's like a house, so everybody can sleep there. There's a kitchen. It's kind of a weird layout, like the control rooms in the basement, the live rooms upstairs. But you have these beautiful views of Stinson from the live room. So anyway, Jeremy had it in there. So we got like a discounted rate and started, just like with the 3 days, maybe even 2 days for the first session. And the plan was to go in and record the tunes that we had been playing at Doc's Lab. We spent the whole first day just like pulling our hair out. I don't think we got a single thing tracked on the first day. And then the second day maybe got like, we tried to go for 2 songs and maybe got 1 usable thing. So that's how the sessions started. And it quickly sort of became apparent to me that like that band, that configuration was like not the type of, lineup to just get into a room and play together and knock tunes out, to a click, and do basics the way that you would normally cut basic tracks. And, came away from the first session with some rough mixes and was just kind of disappointed with what I was hearing. Felt a little deflated. So I just ended up like going home and firing up GarageBand. And I had like just gotten a little Apogee interface. And I started tracking some demos, just with like a little pocket operator drum machine, maybe 1 little synth. And yeah, I made maybe like 4 or 5 demos and made some mixes for Jeremy Black. We met at the park one day and I just played them all for him. And he was like, "This is awesome. I would love for us to go in this direction next time we're in the studio." So we sort of from there started phasing out the spirits, in that like we weren't bringing the rhythm section in to play live tunes. And at that point we'd sort of moved beyond the tunes that the spirits were doing anyway. That said, Eric DiBardino ended up playing bass on pretty much every track. And he was great because like we needed a foundation to sort of move the initial demos forward with. And obviously having bass is great. So like the Spirits guys were still hanging out at the sort of the first half of the sessions. So we would like, I would get a couple of days of recording time, and then months would go by. I'd use some more vacation time. We'd get another 3 or 4 days. So it sort of started to evolve to a place where it was just me and Jeremy Black. And we had maybe, 10 or so songs, but they just didn't really feel right to me. They were neither here nor there. And I think it was at that point that I called you and asked if you were willing to come in and cut some tracks. I think by then it was 2016, and we had done that brick and mortar gig, the Animals in Bloom like anniversary show, which was a nice experience playing with you again. But if you remember, I'm sure you do, it was like right after the warehouse fire in Oakland.
Yeah,
and
ghost ship
it was
fire.
kind of a heavy, it was like literally the night, it was like the day after or something. So
the fire happened on the 2nd, and we played on my birthday, the 3rd. That was the show.
Yep.
So I think we went into that venue with already a weird,
heavy vibe, for sure.
Exactly.
I can't remember when we played next, but I think that was like, I think maybe we even talked about it then.
Well, the next one was the Sammy Party, which was about 10 months later.
Right. Yeah, that would have been in October of the next year.
Yeah.
So anyway, somewhere around between that brick and mortar show and then the Big Light 10-year anniversary or whatever, I think that's when we started to talk about you coming into Panoramic, and like that was when everything sort of turned. I remember we had you in for like, you were the only guy from Big Light who came in. Actually, no, Steve spent a night there, but I think you spent like two or three nights. And we literally just focused on, most of the time, on just adding your guitar parts that you came up with sort of on the spot. I remember there was like a box of Earthquaker pedals there, and I brought like a vocal synth box that we ended up plugging your guitar into. And we just spent days, adding guitar.
That was less than 24 hours. We did everything in less than a 24-hour span, because I only spent one night in Stinson. So we drilled it the night I got. We just drilled it. We just went for it. We smoked a ton of weed, drank a ton of coffee, and recorded.
I remember you hanging out the next day, though, because we went back to like vocals, and like the first track on the album, 42nd Avenue. I remember you specifically like being in my cans, being like, do it again, do it harder, yell louder, sing harder. So
I thought that was probably one of the best vocal takes you ever did. Was that?
It's much to your credit. So so that was when it turned. It just shifted overnight into a Big Light record.
And what's the name of that song, real quick? Let everybody know so they can reference it later.
It's the first track. It's 42nd Avenue. At least that's what's in the liner notes right now. Unless I decide to change the name in the next 5 days. But 42nd Avenue is the name of the song. You added synth parts. There was one tune, Monday. I remember we opened it up and we were trying to think of what to do with it. And you're like, this is good. Just, I don't want to do anything. Like, let's move on to the next one. But I think every other one has you on guitar and synth or just guitar. But after that, it was clear that this was going to be a Big Light record. So we had Steve come in. I think he was that was next, because it was like, all right, if this is going to be a Big Light record, we need Steve to sing. And that was really the focus. I think D-Bar did such a knockout job on the bass parts that we didn't really want to mess with that. He had put in like a lot of work. And, you know, I felt like at that point it wasn't the type of record where, you know, it needed to be just the four of us and Jeff in, you know, on the tracks. It was from the get-go, it was kind of its own beast. And yeah, so we had Steve come in, and he added, I think everybody added synth. Even Bradley might have hit a key on something. But Steve cut vocal harmonies on anything you hear a harmony on is Steve. I think he added some melodica. Just did like the Stevie thing, which is great because everybody, you know, really thinks of him as a bass player, which of course he's, you know, that's what he's known for, and he's an incredible bass player. But he's also just a versatile musician and just knows sound and really like knows melody, has great ideas. So yeah, adding him was you know, definitely sort of cemented the deal. And then of course Bradley came in and really just helped us clean up the drums that we had, and added some percussion and did like timpani, and just put his stamp on it, you know? So while, you know, we were never all there at the same time recording, you know, I don't think that's really a super common thing these days anyway. You know, unless you're doing that like kind of Tiny Telephone John Vanderslice thing where you all set up in a room and, you know, and try to go for those like sort of live basic tracks. But that was never the vibe, you know. We were really, like I said, working off of GarageBand demos, you know, that we put into an API console. So yeah, I mean, so that's actually it in a nutshell.
But it also kind of feels like, if memory serves correct, that, I mean, I don't even know if Big Light was really even a band at that point to be putting a record out. I think this was maybe a little bit more of
yeah.
It just felt like...
That's the funny thing. It's like I ended up with what I knew was a Big Light record, but it was still very TBD on how like it was going to be put out in my mind. And it also, like, you know, Jeremy Black was like, look, dude, this is a Big Light record now. So I think that part of that feeling made me kind of sit on it. And, you know, like we finished the sessions, and then Jeremy Black up and moved to Germany before we mixed it properly. So that put things on hold for a while and bought us some time. He came back last winter, and that's when we just kind of finished everything. Maybe like added a couple of things, but generally just worked off of the Panoramic mixes. And by that point, you know, it was, I think we started to talk about putting it out as Big Light. And yeah, so, you know, obviously there's like another part of that story, which is why we, you know, like while we started sussing that out, you know, that we were going to put out a record, we started recording this other set of songs, which, you know, we can get to that another time. But yeah, and I think I'd said this to you once before. It's like the album that we last put out, The Well Wishers, sort of felt like, you know, the sound of a band breaking up. Whereas, you know, just in like the lyrical content, the whole vibe. And this is literally sort of a sonic document of a band getting back together. And I think it's, you know, it's definitely a weird record. I think you would probably agree. Like, it's got a lot of different sounds, like found sounds. There's sort of this like noise collage, sonic collage thing happening. And that was very intentional. The whole process was a chance for me to really just get to know like a studio a little bit better, and to play with instruments that weren't guitars. And we had some great engineers who came in. Kevin Friedrichsen, who runs the Gray Room now, like incredible engineer. He was helping out, and he brought in just like a little small modular like skiff, a small system. And I heard what he was doing, like, while we were sort of like, remiking the room or whatever, he'd be messing with this thing. And we ended up recording a couple of things. Like that song Waves, there's this drop where, and I think you really helped flesh this out, but the song sort of starts with just like a kick, and it's basically like my voice and your guitar sort of doing the same melody. And then there's this drop where this just wall of sound comes in. And that was Friedrichsen's modular, which, when deployed like with some, taste and tact, can sound really good. And yeah, so that was another thing with just how that record came together. Is it just wasn't a very typical experience for me. From my previous experience, it was basically just, okay, Fred, time to record your vocal parts. We were going in with songs that we had previously, played live. So it was a learning experience, and definitely one of those records where, the songs were fleshed out during the process. So on the flip side of that, I think it's been really cool to try to pivot back to like more traditional arranged songs, on this second EP that we'll eventually put out. And there's definitely going to be a cool little duality there. I think Ships is going to be one of those things where people either like, they really like it or they really hate it. So I'm excited to just see how people react to it, because it's definitely a different kind of record than what Big Light's done in the past. So yeah, that I hope I didn't like answer too long there. But that's the story of it, in a nutshell. There's obviously always more to tell, but yeah, like really it was, started with just trying to capture a couple of songs and realizing that I just didn't have the right setup to make that happen. And then, just kind of making lemonade from there with Jeremy. And of course, everything really gelled once you guys got involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think the record kind of symbolizes like, the whole Lemonade thing where, Big Light, let's say as a unit, probably was at its lowest point around that time. It was non-existent, right?
Yeah.
So to have this record kind of come back and bring us all back to being not only friends again, but, peers and coworkers and bandmates and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's really, you just hit it like right on the head. Like that is exactly what this record means to me. And it's just like a testament to our friendships and how much we care about Big Light and sort of like the community that surrounds it. And yeah, it's something we really want to keep going, and there's no reason to not do that. I think we're really lucky in a way, because we're now in this place where we're still making music. We're not playing a ton of shows, the shows that we have been playing, the handful that we did last year, I thought were some of the best shows we've ever played.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, it's so funny. It's like we're not trying to go out there and be road dogs and live out of a van. And in a way, like I feel like it's enabled us to really focus on what's important, and that's like our relationships and doing music right. And also just getting, having a chance to really, without any pressure whatsoever, kind of explore what we could do, in this new paradigm that we're in.
I think you're nailing it. I think there's part of this process that we're going through when, we're not 30 years old anymore, trying to make it per se. You don't have the weight of that world on your shoulders as you're trying to make music on a nightly basis. Meanwhile, not being able to like pay your rent or really feed yourself, or all the low points that we'd all hit as musicians in that band, or as most musicians hit at some point in their career.
Yeah, which you see every night, I'm sure, working at the Independent, just the stress that comes along with that job. And I'm talking not about your job specifically, but bands that are coming through your club. Like I'm sure you are reminded on a constant basis how tough and challenging and kind of shitty that life can be.
Sure. Well, I mean, just on the surface, rock and roll is expensive. Rock and roll is just an expensive hobby to begin with. Just to not let's just break it down and say, let's just be in a fun band together on a Friday night. You still got to go get your gear, your guitar, your amps, all that kind of stuff. You got to book studio time. You have to take 4 hours out of your week. You got to rehearse. I mean, there's so much that goes into taking a stage and finally performing your music or your art to people. And yeah, you get pressure from every side. You get pressure from your family. You're 30 years old and your family looks at you and they say, well, what are you still trying to do here?
Yeah, what the fuck are you doing with your life?
I'm playing the Saint on a Tuesday night. Everything's going perfect, and then, and then at the same time, you watch your friends, especially in a city that we live in, San Francisco, that is filled with successful people, smart, successful people doing cool things. So you watch your friends lapping you in life. You watch your friends lapping you in financial means. You watch your friends lapping you in the size of their apartment, all that kind of stuff. So
families.
Right. So that's pressure. And then, yeah, just trying to get your art across, I think, is the toughest part of that all, is trying to be heard, trying to get who you are out onto a record and hope that somehow it translates to people. That's all pressure. So to now be in a position where, I love our friends. I love the community of people that still come to see Big Light. We're having this conversation because of them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we're making this music necessarily for them or for what they might think of it at all. And to not have that pressure we know we're not going to go on tour. We know we're not going to sell any records. We don't really care if anybody likes it or not. So then all of a sudden you just now have this, take the handcuffs off and you can make a record like Ships that, you're right. I don't think most of the people that are listening to this podcast right now are going to like that record. I don't think they're going to hate it. I don't think it's a thing where they're going to think this sucks, but I think they're going to probably be looking for a Big Light record, loud drums,
we'll be
loud guitars,
that one guy or girl that loves it. Yeah, they'll be like that one person who's like, "This is the best record you guys have ever made."
Right.
But yeah, everybody.
Well, how do you feel about it? Do you think it's a good record?
It's funny. I for a while really oscillated because it took so long to make it, and what's on Ships isn't what came out of those sessions. There were a bunch of tunes that didn't get included. There was an eighth song that you decided, your one piece of feedback to me was like, that one song doesn't really fit. So there's like that one, and then there's like another 4 tunes. But my feeling about it is, I got so in the weeds with just trying to figure out like how to edit the songs in a way that it flowed together. And at some point I got really sick of it and was like, fuck this. I don't even care if anybody ever hears it. And this is when Jeremy went to Germany. Cause at that point I couldn't continue to work on it anyway. Cause he had, he essentially had the sessions, in Germany. And you know how Black works. It's like, there's like 85 plugins across a session. And so I couldn't load up those sessions myself. Like it just sound weird. If I could get any sound at all. But when he got back and I had not heard anything for, 4 or 5 months, my ears were sort of like, they reopened to it. And I actually started to feel really good about it. And, I don't really like to compare records to other records. It's just sort of like, I think each one should sort of stand on its own, and should serve as sort of a document of like where you're at. And in that sense, like I like it, and I feel like it does sort of capture something. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't think we'd be putting it out if we didn't feel like it was decent enough for us to put our name on it. And I think, I'm at the same time, I'm also really excited for what's next. I always feel like whenever you finish a record, you sort of like, you get out of that process and you've learned a lot. And then you can sort of start thinking about how you can apply like what you learned, but also like what your failures were to whatever's next. So, I think it's just, it's now going to be part of our catalog, and, I'm happy with it.
So
like I said, I wouldn't want to put it out if I wasn't. So
would you say that the songs that are on the record are specific to that time when you were writing them, or do you feel like you still relate to the songs today?
We
were clearly in a different position as a band and as people.
Yeah, because it's been a few years. I mean, like anything, like some of those tunes, like I was in a relationship literally while that record was being made, and it was like very slowly falling apart. And so like that, that's reflected there, I think, in some of the songs, and just, the vibe in general. So yeah, it's always going to mean something very different to me. And I really try to not, tell people what a song is about, I'll even throw out disinformation, and, I'll change song titles to try to like, throw people off, and it's really personal stuff usually. That said, some of the tracks, what we ended up doing was using like the scratch vocals, where in some cases I was literally just ad-libbing lyrics. I'd maybe like have, a notebook in front of me with some words, but like, literally coming up with phrases on the spot. There isn't a whole lot of that made the final, the final mixes, but yeah, there's always like that duality. The songs will always mean something to me, but like I hope that, people find their own meaning in them.
What do you think when you say you're excited for the future or what's next? What do you think that means? Besides,
well, right now, God, it's hard to say. just because the future seems so uncertain, to a point where it also sort of affects how I think about the future of our band. Because, like, we had initially planned on doing some release shows, like, what was it going to be, in June? And then we were going to, potentially do an East Coast run in August. So I was really excited about that prospect. Obviously that's off the table now. I'm excited. Like, honestly, the thing I'm excited the most about right now is the opportunity for us to, when this pandemic is over, to pull our friends together and throw a party and just celebrate life in general. But like on a deeper level, with the band, I'm just excited and happy about the fact that we sort of found this footing that I think is actually going to be sustainable for us. And, as Bradley's got a young family. I think as his kids get older, he'll maybe be able to play a little bit more. I think, Steve, same thing. I think I see him leaning in more. And I think, like, it's going to be really important for us to just keep some momentum going in this, like, weird cadence we have where we're not touring, but we want to keep putting music out. I think the fact that you and I have been able to build home studios is like a total game changer for us. And we've, like, barely scratched the surface on what the possibilities are for that. So, I think finishing this second EP is definitely, top of mind right now. And especially because, we have some time to do it. I think once we get ships out and we get through this little promo cycle and release all of the release stuff that we're doing, then it's just time to get back to work. And, I think that's really you and I driving things. So yeah, I really want to also, put something out on vinyl this year, whether it's like a printing of ships or, I think at this point, like, probably would make more sense for us to make vinyl of this second collection of songs that we're working on. And I think they also might just translate better to vinyl, just because they're kind of acoustic based and just have like a nice warm tonality. There aren't, a ton of things going on in the mix. And I really love that we're sort of like deciding to strip things down a little bit for this next set. So yeah, I'm just excited that, we have the opportunity to do this, that we're still, like we have people who care enough to come out to shows, to kind of tune in. And then, just excited that we have our band back and have pretty strong relationships and friendships. I think that at the end of the day is the thing that I'm most excited about. I just look forward to, like, doing more stuff with you guys. And it's gonna be, it's also just gonna be like medicine to get through this whole, pandemic thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why Big Light is still Big Light, because even though the first, let's say, Big Light 2.0, which was, let's say, when I joined the band, right, and when that kind of came to an end, I think anybody who's listening know that didn't end so pretty. So I think, and it was never because we didn't like each other as people or personalities and stuff like that. I mean, we were brothers and we loved each other, but, business and
it's tough, right, being in a band,
right.
Like, I have so much respect for any band that's able to keep it together, because, it literally is like being in a marriage with 5 people. And, we all know that like most marriages end in divorce. So it's, it's a tough thing for sure. And it takes a lot of work, but, I'm also excited just about the fact that like, and we've talked about this a little bit, like San Francisco sucks right now. It's just not a great place to be a band that's like trying to make a living out of it. But we sort of figured out like a workaround to that, and I think that like it's like I think we feel somewhat of a duty to keep doing this because even though you and I are from the East Coast, Bradley's from the East Coast, we're definitely a San Francisco band. And I feel like there's value in that, in the community, like really needs local music. And if we're able to do that on our own terms, like, then we're winning.
Right. I mean, I think that's part of the goal of Ships, at least for me personally, is not necessarily so much as to like, are we going to sell a lot of these albums? It's more just to remind people that there are still bands in San Francisco making music or making art, and maybe not just bands, art in general. I mean, I think we live in a city that doesn't care about art at all unless you put $100 price tag or a suit and a tie on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like the idea of being the surviving aspect of this old school San Francisco art community that used to still be around. We didn't get kicked out. Fortunately, luckily for us, we're still here and we're still making music and still making art and trying to get it out.
Yeah, and I feel like we were lucky. Like we when we were trying to really do it, like that was really the sort of the last sort of era of like a real local music scene. At least for me, that's what it felt like. So like we do, we have our roots in a community that has been hit really hard, and I feel like there's just it's a meaningful thing to do to just continue on and make music and play shows occasionally. And like, also just what's nice about this record, not that it's going to make us any money, but like, we can hand off anything we make to a charity. It's like, not like you said, like we're not trying to keep our cell phone bills on and, survive through our music. It's like, we're purely in it for the sake of the art.
Sweet. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to tell people about this new record?
No, I feel like we kind of covered it a bunch. I would really love to do a little podcast conversation about the making of Animals in Bloom sometime. I think that would be hilarious.
Well, I think we might have the time on our hands to do that.
Exactly. There's so many good stories. But that's it. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know.
Do episode 2.
Yeah. I mean, just to flip the script on you, like what are you excited about, and like what do you see happening in the next, year or so?
I think it's a lot of what I was just saying. I think it's like like you said, we're from the East Coast, but I think we moved to San Francisco, and when we got here, we had discovered a place that was unlike anything that we'd ever been to on the East Coast. We were able to kind of be ourselves and be a little bit weirder than we were on the East Coast. And I want to kind of keep that weirdness going with Big Light.
Yeah.
Like San Francisco lacks a weirdness factor, and I think this record is weird. Yeah. And it's a weird release in a weird time. in a band in a weird position. And I'm just excited to see, I think what you said too, getting this next EP out, we've got recording gear of our own, to maybe just see what some kind of, experimentation brings, with new music. But, I think I'm just happy to be on a phone call with you, or be on a phone call with Steve or Bradley or Ted Kartzman and Tanner, or anybody that still shows any kind of like interest in our art, in our music. And just to be able to get on a phone call with everybody once a week is enough for me to keep doing this.
Yeah.
That's that's it. It's like as long as I feel good when, I think one of the things that made Big Light so accessible for everybody over the years, and we talk about this a lot, is it wasn't necessarily the music first. It was more the hang that was around the music. We always threw a good party. We always had a good backstage scene. We always carried a good vibe. Any time we would go to another festival, somehow we'd manage to take that vibe over and create it our own.
Well, people would book us because of that reputation.
Right, because we knew how to party. I think I forgot my point, but I think it's just more like, I think that
I hear what you're saying.
We still carry that, and I think that's why we still do it. I think is
and sort of like on to that point, like I want to I'm really excited to just have an opportunity to like have experiences together outside of playing music. It's like a lot of our music is the product of just different experiences that we have, or like trouble that we get into, road trips that we go on, whatever. Like I just want to do more of that, because it always feeds, it really massages that like songwriting muscle. It's like the more we, the more time we spend together, as a band and with our wider sort of like friends and supporters, like the more music we're going to make. So,
and it doesn't feel so much like a fan base anymore as it does feel like more like a community of people. And I know that sounds so cliche to say.
Well, yeah, community, family, like
right.
It definitely feels
and
like
it's
that.
Probably the reason that, if you want to flip it on me, when you asked me to come to Stinson and play those records, we weren't really talking. Like we had kind of like we had closed our differences, but we weren't like let's necessarily friends at that point.
No, we weren't like going out for coffee every week or anything.
No, and then that first Animals in Bloom, the 10 years of Animals in Bloom, or whatever that symbolized that gig. That was that felt like a start, but I think it was that like the Captain Sammy's birthday party that we had played.
Yeah,
that 2-set show in front of all our friends, and I think it was on that stage or that night that made me realize where it's like, okay, this is worth spending a couple extra minutes of your week or hours of your week to try to like continue to try to keep this ball rolling. If anything, just to like get out on a Friday night, slam back a couple whiskeys and play some fucking rock and roll. You know what I mean? Because like, what else do I have? Like, what else do I have in my life?
It's like, therapy. It's total therapy. No, we're so fucking lucky to have the friends and fans that we do, because, we just wouldn't be doing it, like you said, like that anniversary gig, like that was the catalyst for, I think that, session that we did when you booked an Airbnb down in Santa Cruz. I think that came out of that would have been early the next year. So yeah, I think we owe a lot of our being a band these days to our friends and supporters, for sure.
Sure, and to each other. I think it's so easy to harp on the negative side of rock and roll and your experiences with being in a band and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, there's times where we disagree and my brain goes back to 2011 and fighting like we did back in the day. So it's like, things I still got to work past, but like, I'm happy to work past those things today.
Yeah.
Again,
and we all,
that,
that's how life is.
Right.
That's how the mind works. But cool. Yeah, I honestly, I couldn't be more excited. Just, it's like even more so now that we're all just stuck at home. Like we have something to, like you said, like we're meeting every week now, and we've had, a project to focus on. I think that's just going to lead to more music and us just, spending more time together virtually and in person eventually. So yeah, this is going to be a good year in that sense, and it's so big light. It's like during like maybe the worst year, during like the worst, disaster we'll see in our lifetime, like we couldn't be doing better.
Yeah, you're right.
It's bizarre.
Well, I think we should end on that. I think that's...
Cheers. Well,
yeah. I'm happy we did this.
Chatting.
I hope...
Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, I hope people get a little bit... I don't know. I hope they get something out of this. I hope this doesn't just go to empty ears in the end. But
that one guy will just be like, that's the best podcast
if you just touch one, if you just change one life, that's it.
If all just right, for that. Cool, man. Well, thanks for giving me a call.
Yeah, I love you so much, buddy.
Love you too.